Well, I figured eventually I was going to need to make this video, so now's about as good a time as any. Why the $15 decks? Why is that the thing that I do? Now, if you're here for talk about super great mechanics and Magic the Gathering lore and history, this might not be the time for that. I might not have a whole lot of that to bring up for you guys today. This is going to be a very personal video. For those of you who are part of my main channel, none of what I say here is going to be news to really any of you. But for those of you who have started here just as a viewer of my Magic the Gathering content, then this is probably gonna be some news for you. So why $15 decks on my channel? Why has that been such a big focus? Well, primarily because of third places. That's the primary reason. Now, for those of you who aren't really big into sociology or stuff like that, you might not have ever heard the term third place. So let me go ahead and break it down really easily. Your first place is your home. This is the place you eat, sleep, go to the bathroom. You live here, right? Your second place, generally speaking, is your workplace, the place you leave to go out and make sure that you are making money. Your third place, however, is a little bit more esoteric. Your third place is the place where you socialize. Third places generally are neutral locations. They're not tied down to your financial status, your politics, any type of legal requirements. They don't put importance on your social or socioeconomic status at all. The main activity at a third place should be conversation. They should be accessible, accommodating. Third places should have regulars who frequent them all the time. These should basically be home away from homes. Places that offer stress relief from the everyday turmoils of life. Now, unfortunately, here in recent years, a lot of people have actually lost their third places. The mall used to be a third place for a lot of people, the meeting zone for people to hang out in. Parks are not generally places where a ton of people hang out all the time anymore. These are places where only people who are parents usually are bringing their kids. And if you're a parent with kids, then taking your kids to a park where they can play on play sets and stuff like that, that's perfectly reasonable and fine. But if a bunch of 25-year-olds that had no kids hung out in the same place, they would get kind of side-eyed for good reason. No, a third place is a place that everyone should have access to and should be comfortable for all of them. Generally speaking, there's only two main third places that nerds are going to frequent. Usually it's going to be a bar or some type of card shop or gaming shop. Even arcades used to be third places that people would spend more time in, and those have been disappearing rapidly since consoles took over just about everything. That's not to say that consoles taking over everything was a bad idea for the gaming market. I prefer people being able to play video games in the comfort of their own home. But a lot of people don't know what to do when they don't have a third place. They go home and they go to sleep, they wake up, they go to work, and then they come back home and start to feel isolated and atomized. These people don't tend to have a place to go and socialize with friends, and then it becomes hard for them to form bonds with other people. And then if some type of massive overhaul happens in their life, they don't have a place where they could have met anybody to begin with who could have helped them through that issue, whether it be talking it out with them, or helping them out financially, or giving them a skill that they didn't know. Your water pipes burst and you can't afford a plumber, but you've got a friend who you met at a third place, and they know plumbing. That's one of those things that happens at these third places. Now, why am I talking about this kind of sociological stuff on a Magic the Gathering channel? Well, put it simply, the card shop is a third place. Your LGS is a third place. This is a place that your socioeconomic status should not matter. Your politics should not matter. Your status in society shouldn't matter. This is the great equalizer, the place where everybody can come together and do the gathering part of, well, Magic the Gathering. When I was growing up, I grew up in a very, very restrictive private school that didn't even allow me to speak unless it was within the last 5 minutes of lunchtime. If any of you have ever gone to Pensacola Christian Academy, I don't know if those rules have gotten any less strict, but when I was there, I didn't make that many friends because I didn't have that many opportunities to do so. By the time I went to public school, I barely knew how to communicate with anybody. I actually broke down crying several times because I did not know how to speak with people. But there was one place where I was learning to socialize, where I was having a medium that helped a ton. I learned to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, I learned Pokemon as well, but nobody played Pokemon back then where I lived. But everybody played Yu-Gi-Oh! And everybody played Magic. At least everybody at the shops. So I would go to the card shop, and that's where I would meet friends, some that I still have to this day. I would learn how to communicate with other people of various age groups. Some people in my friend group were 10, 12 years older than me. I learned how to operate with people of all walks and sizes and areas of life because I was at a third place where I had the ability to communicate with these people. And remember, one of the aspects of a third place is communication is the primary goal. You are there to socialize. You are there to make friends. Now, it helps in a card shop that we've all got a medium, right? We sit down for a tournament and somebody we might not have ever spoken to outside of the shop has been paired against us in a round. And now suddenly we have an avenue for conversation. If you're not a great player, maybe this is somebody who's going to take you under their wing and teach you how to be better. Or if you're the good player, you can take that person under your wing and teach them to be better. Maybe they've got some cards in their deck that you really like and they've got extras and you want to trade with them. Maybe, there's a billion scenarios that stem from that moment that you sit down with somebody at a card shop. And as Magic the Gathering has changed as a game, for better or worse, I've talked about this in previous videos, as it's changed and become more of a social game, a social contract where we're using cards to facilitate conversation more than a competitive 1 versus 1, my strongest deck versus your strongest deck type of experience for most people, it's ever more important for people to not lose the ability to sit down and gather with other people. Now, I did mention that with a third place, you're not supposed to really have an economic barrier for entry. You should be able to go here and just enjoy yourself. This is one of the reasons that a bar works as a third place for a lot of people. There's no barrier to entry as long as you can afford a bottle of booze. You sit down and get some food or get a drink, and suddenly you might have a chance to interact with people. Although talking with random people at the bar has become a little less easy in recent years. People are more atomized, people are looking at their phones more often, and this is where card games come in. Even if I'm the type of person to be in the middle of a crowd and just stare at my phone the entire time and not interact with anybody in that crowd, the minute that I'm interested in playing a game that requires me to be around other people and playing with those other people, suddenly I'm put in a scenario where I have to communicate with those people on some level. And because of the way Magic works, because of the way Commander works, this is a format that's broken in half and pasted together with glue in a dream. We have a billion Rule Zero conversations about what types of things are okay, what things are taboo, what things are worthwhile to play. Should you be playing a strong deck, a fast deck? Should you be playing CDH or not? And ultimately, the majority of these people playing Commander, they're playing casual Commander. It's the most accessible format that Magic's ever had. And so what do you do when you want to play at the same level of all the people at the table? You don't want to just lose every single game you go into. That doesn't feel good for anyone. You want to sit down with everybody and you want to play on an equal playing field. And unless you Rule Zero everybody to playing a weaker deck when you're at the table, it can feel daunting to do so. And a Commander deck is actually a fairly complicated thing to assemble on your own. 99 individual unique cards, basic lands not including, that all have to have some kind of synergy with a single card? That's a daunting task if you are a new player. But it's not if somebody's building the decks for you. And it's especially not if those decks cost literal pennies. I wanted the $15 league to be a thing originally because I wanted players to have access to strong decks that they could play at a league table with other people playing other $15 decks, because I found that that power level was about what I enjoyed playing at. I have a CEDH deck, I have fully built Shalai and Halar, I have super high power decks like AC, where my entire strategy is pull him out turn 2 or 3 and then drop an Avenger of Zendikar on your head or a Scoot Swarm and laugh as my billions of tokens end the game because I've got a Concurrent Crossroads. I've got those kinds of decks, but they're not really the ones I prefer to play because they're not the games that have fun stories associated with them. The $15 decks operate within that realm of the speed at which I like to play, and they tend to play well with other people at other tables. I had an experience recently where a Prosper player at the Magic place that I go to, my LGS, said that he was tired of being targeted because he played Prosper, and he's always playing a weaker deck because he's playing Budget. I pulled out my Budget Sephiroth deck that I've talked about on my channel and proceeded to basically wipe the floor with everybody there to show, hey, your budget is not an excuse for your performance. You can become a better player. You can learn how to put cards together in a more coherent way that aren't just dirtling, that are actually leading to an end goal. These are things you can do. It's not the hardest thing in the world. But there's a barrier to entry there still. Most people, when they're getting into Commander, they're going to buy a precon and they're going to find out how wonky precons are designed. It's my opinion that despite precons playing well with each other and playing decently enough in most tables, they suffer from a lot of problems. They tend to run a crap ton of tap lands. If they're not running them, they're more premier product that tends to cost more than $40. And even the ones that tend to have better mana bases because they're, struck to dual color decks, they're running multiple strategies because Wizards of the Coast designs these decks so that you can pick one of 2 or 3 lieutenant commanders in the deck to be the forefront of the strategy. And that's fine and dandy if you're trying to pick up something to be a project, something that you can tinker with, something you can have fun with. That's perfectly reasonable. But at $40, sometimes $60, precons can be a bit of a steep price grab for somebody. Even just getting a video game at $60 is a bit much for people who are working paycheck to paycheck, or worse, are kids and don't have much more than a little bit of an allowance to play with. So how do we make the game accessible for those people? Because having access to third places is so important for people's mental health. You have no idea how important it is for people to be able to mentally categorize my home, my work, and the place I hang out as 3 distinct areas. It's a reason why people who work at home tend to avoid the office if they don't have to be in it, because the office in their own home is still their second place. It's in the same square footage, but it's still the place of work, and oftentimes then the place of stress. So the only way to separate it from everything else is to literally separate yourself from it. And if the only place that you're socializing with people is online, you're not learning how to handle people's mannerisms, you're not learning anything about their body language, and you're also not learning how to engage with those people yourself. There's only so far you can get socializing online, and we've seen that people's mental health tends to improve when they are having conversations with people in real life, when they are part of larger, broad communities of people with diverse mindsets, as opposed to the more echo-chambery communities that we tend to find ourselves in online. These niche communities do have a purpose in our life, but they are no substitution for going out and, frankly, touching grass and meeting new people. So how do we make a game accessible enough that is known for having, cards that cost hundreds of dollars? How do we make that game accessible for people? Well, we use the accumulated knowledge of multiple people who have worked on this game, both as designers and as people making resources like MTG Goldfish and Scryfall and Moxfield. We use all of this to bring those people into the game. Instead of styling on new players with powerful decks and going, aha, I got my win, now I feel better about myself, we could instead elevate those other players and give them more fun and enjoyable experiences. These are the things that cause them to come back to the LGS, and let's be honest, when people come back to your local game store, the likelihood your game store is going to stick around and not shut down increases. Like, you want people to come back to your LGS. You want your game to be mainstream. You want this to be something everybody can enjoy, because if you don't have other people to play with yourself, you're not playing Magic anymore. You're playing Solitaire with pretty cards, which just makes you a Storm player, really, but that's not important. That's neither here nor there. Ultimately, for me, I grew up in a very isolated childhood. And card games were the way I learned to communicate with other people. And because I had that experience, I know other people are going to have that experience too. And I grew up very poor. Being able to afford like $1 donut every other week or so was a luxury to me. And I didn't even realize that until my mom opened up about our finances to me years later when I was an adult. I had no concept that I was living differently than other people, but I knew that I couldn't get new things, but maybe once a year during Christmas time. So what do we do to make the game accessible for people who grew up like me? Well, we find a way to let them play the game for very, very cheap. Not everybody wants to give their cards away to a kid wanting to learn Magic. I got lucky as a kid. I had a bunch of people just give me their spare commons and uncommons after draft tournaments, and that became the basis of my original collection. I started out with the 8th edition core set Learn to Play thing that had the Elvish Champion up front, back when it was still a Lord type card. That was my way of beginning Magic the Gathering, and not everybody's gonna have that experience. Some people are going to walk into a card shop, have no idea how to communicate with people, and the only medium by which they're going to be able to facilitate conversations is already having a deck that they can walk in with and play with other people. So if we give people a barrier of entry of $15, I think that's a reasonable starting point. A lot of kids can earn that as an allowance, and a lot of adults can afford that because that's what minimum wage is going to eventually anyways, but if we're lucky. At $15, if you can play something that is strong enough to play at most tables, then the ability for that third place experience to blossom, it begins with that. The minute you have a deck that is strong enough to play with other people, and the only thing you have to do is get better at playing the deck, suddenly that opens up a world of possibilities for you. And hell, maybe when you've got a little more money, you can buy a pre-con and start with that kind of project every now and again. But I think $15 is a perfectly reasonable floor for people to start. And I know that when I was growing up, I needed those third places really, really badly. So there's probably plenty of people now who need it too. At my shop, there's no less than 3 or 4 kids that are starting their Magic journeys right now. Some of them are doing so with their parents, and some of them are doing it on their own. And when they lose games, they tend to go, oh, if only I had the expensive cards. If only I had the Ancient Tomb, if only I had the Mana Crypt, if only I had the tutors that these people have access to, then I would be able to win my games. And I think providing something to these people that allows them to win games consistently, but it does not require them to shell out the kind of money that those cards have, I think that's helpful. I'm not the only channel on YouTube who's doing budget decks, and by no means at all. There's a huge bit of inspiration I take by watching Commander's Quarters, and hell, Tolarian Community College also talks a lot about how Magic the Gathering has helped their mental health. Like, the professor's done a lot of work as well that has inspired me to do the stuff that I do on my channel. But ultimately, it's a passion of mine that I want to share with people. And I think sharing a passion with people, normally you would do so by giving them something. I can't give 1 billion people something over the internet. That's not reasonable. But I can make $15 decks. And Hell, it's a fun deck building challenge too. I've got 4 of my $15 decks built IRL, and I take them into my shop frequently and play with them. I've got Sephiroth, I've got Landcat, I've got Shanna, and I've got Eowyn, and all of them have overperformed at the tables I've played them in. And the gold fishing and testing I've done for the other decks shows that they're doing just as well. And when I see comments from people that tell me that they got one of the decks that I was working on and said, oh my god, it performed super well at the table I'm playing at, or wow, this thing did super well, it's got a super strong strategy for it. I love hearing that kind of stuff. I love knowing that people are taking stuff that I'm doing and utilizing it and enjoying it. So I guess this entire tirade was just to talk about third places more than anything. We've done a lot of research to show that if an environment operates as a third place, it helps a ton with people's mental health. And I think especially after COVID and with the political climate we're dealing with in the States right now, and just the way things are going and how negative they can seem all the time, having access to a third place where your social status and the money that you earn is more important now than ever before. I think people are better equipped to handle the world when they're happier. And I think people are happier when they're given the tools they need to be happy. If you're not constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses by spending more and more money on a hobby, waiting for the time where you can enjoy it, being able to start out enjoying it with everybody else has a whole lot more weight than some people might think. But, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hopefully this video spoke to some of y'all's experiences, or maybe I'm going to get some comments telling me how pretentious I am in the comments. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I've got plenty more deck ideas that I'm going to be working on in the future, and hopefully y'all will be here for those. And thank every single one of you for all of the help and all the support the channel has gotten up to this point. I'm thrilled that we've passed 2,000 subscribers on here, and I didn't realize that I was going to be monetized as fast as I did, or the channel would be growing as fast as it is. It's an amazing experience so far, and I want to keep doing it for as long as it'll go. So, anywho, let me know how you feel in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Subscribe, all that fun jazz. Insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Britzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, Sagitt, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.